someone asked me the other day, what's your earliest memory? And my earliest memory that I can remember was a trip my family took from San Diego, California, all the way across the country to Atlanta, Georgia, and they drove all night to Oklahoma City, and then from there we drove straight to Atlanta, Georgia. And my dad wanted to meet an old college buddy, I think from medical school in Oklahoma. Turned out the guy was, as my parents told me, a stick in the mud. And as the kids were like kind of whining about driving all night again, you know, all the way to Atlanta and not staying in a hotel, they said, hey, we're going to check out the Louisiana Hayride. And I'm not even 3 yet. I'm thinking, hayride, what is that? And my older brothers and sisters told me, yeah, they have a tractor that pulls a wagon full of hay, and everybody rides on it. And I was like, wow, we're going on a hayride at night. And next thing I know, we're like in southeast Arkansas at a gas station, and I ask about, when are we going on the hayride? And everybody's like, what? When are we going on the hayride? I want to ride in the hay and jump around in it and stuff. They all laughed at me. That was an old radio show that Dad used to listen to. It went off the air in 1960, and he wanted to ride close enough to Shreveport to listen to a radio broadcast of something that was recorded, and they're playing it on the radio. And so I said, we're not going to ride on a hayride? And they all laughed at me. I'm going to use the bathroom. And we're in Arkansas, it's spring of '65. And my oldest brother got to the bathroom before everybody else. He's been in there for like 30 minutes. Everybody's waiting. There's even a car next to us that pulled up, got gas. And my brother's tying up the men's room. You know, there's like 4 guys or something in the car. 2 of the guys in the back, you know, the one in the back seat on the left, he's got a map open all the way. I'd never seen a map open all the way. I was like, wow, they get big. And there was a guy on his right in the back seat with brown hair. And he kept looking at me, he'd nod and kind of wave, and he'd look over at me and nod, I'd kind of wave, and finally he ended up looking at me and he waved back, and I just went nuts, started waving. My mom got on me about it. It's like, you know, you've been waving to everybody the whole trip. Stop it, knock it off. So they start talking, and we're in our big white station wagon, and I'm in the back with the luggage and the animals and shit. The ones that are, you know, my dad's out walking the poodles. My brother's stopping up the toilet, and so finally he gets out of there. You know, I remember these 2 guys going in. I remember as they, one of them with the brown hair was talking to my mom. You know, the other guy was like, man, be cool, man. That's some guy's wife, man. We don't want to talk to anybody's wife. I could hear him saying that. And, you know, my mom's like, no, it's okay. My husband, no, it's been a long trip. We're coming from California and blah, blah, blah. We just left Oklahoma. And they were like, oh, God, Oklahoma. So, where y'all going? We're going to Georgia. And, you know, where y'all going? Atlanta? Oh, nice. Yeah, we like Atlanta. It's nice. So, my brother gets out of the bathroom, and he's like, Dad, I stopped up the toilet. They had to get the attendant, unclog it. I remember those 2 guys' friends, their back teeth were floating. They had to pee so bad. Finally, they got it unstopped. They went in there and went in, and these guys went in, and you know, my dad's finished, you know, walking the poodles. All the kids have gone to the bathroom, all 6 of us, and we're on our way to Georgia. And I remember getting there at my grandmother's house. It was so cold. Going from San Diego to Atlanta, it was so cold. And I had like this little skinny blanket on my bed. I was freezing. I ended up getting out of the bed and looking for a warm place in the house, and I felt this heat coming up out of the floor. And there was my grandmother's like sitting chair, you know, it had like little flaps on it. And I lifted up the flap, and there was a floor vent. They had like one of those floor furnaces. And so I crawled under there with a pillow off the sofa and one of those little knitted crochet blankets on the sofa, and I went to sleep under there. I was so warm. And I remember waking up, people were like, you saying my name. And I was like, why are they saying my name? I crawl out, hey, there he is. Yeah, I disappeared under the chair. And that was my earliest memory. And one of my favorite memories was spring of 1971. I'm living in Bluffton, South Carolina, on the May River across from Hilton Head, which is being built up as a resort. And I'm out by the beach, and this blue van with New York license plates pulls up and on the beach, and the window rolls down on the passenger side, and some lady calls me over to the van. And I'm looking at the van, it's got blue flowers all over it. I thought, wow, it kind of looks like the Mystery Machine from Scooby-Doo. This is spring of 71. And I go up and it's like, hey, how's it going? What can I do for you? And they asked me about beach rentals. And I just talked to a lady who owned a couple of them. And there was a row of them on the beach, on the water, and then there was a couple of them behind them, or several behind them, and they said, are there any for rent? And I told them the one right there on the corner, that's for rent. She said, how much? And I said, it's $600 a month. She said, how many bedrooms? I said, there's 3 bedrooms. And I remember the guy in the van, her husband, looking over, I don't like it, there's no privacy around here, let's go, I don't like it around here. And she's like, is there anything else? So I said, actually there is. There's a beach rental, a cottage up in the woods on an acre of woods right off the beach. And she said, how much is that? And I said, it's $300 a month. She asked how many bedrooms. I said, there's 2 bedrooms and it's $300 a month. And if you're looking for privacy, it's on an acre. It's up in the middle of that acre, you know? And she turned to her husband, $300 for some privacy, $300 a month for some privacy here versus $3,000 a month in Hilton Head or Myrtle Beach. Let's at least check it out. He's like, all right, let's check it out. So they go and they check it out. And they're checked in about a half hour later. I see them leave the lady's house, pulling into the driveway, the road that goes to their house. And the lady stopped me and had me come over. She's like, come over, I want to talk to you. I'll invite you over for lunch. So I'll go over there and I go up in the house and she introduces herself. She says, hi, my name is Grace. This is my husband, Rick, but you can call me Gracie. And her husband right away is like, no, you can't. You can't call her Gracie. You call her Miss Grace. No, you'll... So he started saying, you know, you'll call her Mrs. Grace. And she's like, no, just call me Gracie. I want to invite you over for lunch. You know, go ask your parents if you can eat lunch with us and come over. I want to talk to you. And right away, the husband, Rick, is like, no, he's too young. He can't hang out with us. He's only 8 years old. And so I asked him, y'all are from New York? I saw your plates. And they're like, yeah. I was like, what part of New York are you from? And they said, I asked them, are you from New York City? No, we're from upstate New York. We live outside of Woodstock. And I was like, oh, are you musicians? And they both looked at each other and said, no. I was like, well, what do y'all do up there? And they looked at each other and he's like, we're artists. I was like, oh, cool. Y'all didn't happen to go to Woodstock, did you? And the husband, Rick's like, how do you know about Woodstock, kid? He never called me by my name. He always called me kid. How do you know about Woodstock, kid? And I told him, well, I lived in Key West at the time, and I heard about it on the radio, and my older brother and oldest sister's friends were all talking about it, so I borrowed my sister's transistor radio, and I was listening to it all weekend long, and whenever the bands came on, they would play one of their songs on the radio. And he's like, how old were you? I was 6, almost 7. He's like, wow, and you knew about Woodstock? I was like, yeah. So how, did y'all go to it? And they looked at each other again. The girl looked at him. Yeah, she looked at me. Yeah, we went there. I was like, well, how was it? It wasn't like they said on TV. I was like, no, it seemed really cool. You know, they had a lot of arts and crafts and other things going on besides the music, and people seemed to have a really good time. They asked me if I saw anything on the news about it. I said, oh yeah, I saw a few clips on the news and on PBS. And I was like, so how was the parking? They said, oh, that was as bad as it was on the news. I was like, yeah, it seemed bad. Did people actually have to park like 4 or 5 or 7 or 8 miles and walk in? They looked at each other, yeah, they did. I was like, wow, that must have been really cool. Did y'all have a good time? Yeah, we had a good time. I asked them, did y'all sell any of your arts and crafts there or anything? Did you paint? And the lady's like, I do paint. And I was like, my sister paints, you know? So they settled in, and it was maybe that first Friday night they were there. It's nighttime. My oldest brother and his friends are the locals in this fishing community of about 62 people, very small. Everybody knows each other, very backward, kind of conservative, except for a couple of people, you know. Those were the ones that got a lot of attention, you know. They swam against the current. And so one of my brother's friends, this guy Ronnie Farmer, decides, let's get some firecrackers. We're going to sneak into their yard at night. We're going to light the firecrackers, throw them at their house, and then run back into the woods and shag ass and scare them. So they did it. And I remember my brother coming home telling, my oldest brother coming home telling the middle brother, because I'm the youngest one, yeah, we lit some firecrackers and threw it at their house. Like, why did y'all do that? Oh, because they got that hippie van. They're a bunch of hippies from New York City. I told him, no, they're actually not hippies from New York City. They're from upstate New York. And they're nice. I've been up there a few times, you know. They're real friendly. They're really nice people. And he's like, yeah, I think they're a bunch of hippies. You see their van. It looks like a flower power van. So I go over there the next day, and I'm walking up the stairs because they're on an elevated cottage in case it floods. And the door was open, but the screen door was right there, and I could hear Rick going off on Gracie. He's like, I don't like it around here, man. It's fucking, you know, the country and shit. I want to get out of here. I'm ready to go right now. And I'm hearing this, so I go up, and I didn't want to hear another word. I just knocked on the door right away, and Gracie came to the door. Oh, hi, Mike. How's it going? Come on in. And I come in, and I could see Rick, and Rick, he's all intense. He's like, you know, he's wound up. And I was like, did anything happen last night? And Gracie's like, yes. Do you know about it? And I was like, yeah. My older brother and a couple of his friends snuck into the backyard, lit a pack of firecrackers, and they threw it at your house. And so Gracie turns to Rick and says, oh, there's firecrackers. Everybody was shooting guns at the house. And I look back at him, and he's kind of looking down, you know, like a little embarrassed. And so she's like, well, didn't you tell them we weren't hippies from New York City? And I was like, yeah, I told them. But they see the van, they just got it stuck in their head. And so Gracie looks at Rick, and he's like, well, tell them that we're dairy farmers. And Rick looks back at her. So now we're milk farmers? She's like, no, we're dairy farmers. We're not milk farmers, we're dairy farmers. And go let them know that. And no, tell you what, invite all 3 of them over, you know, and we'll talk to them. So I did that. I ended up telling my brother and the older guy, Ronnie Farmer, who started all the trouble, the local dude, because we'd only been living there less than a year. And he's like, I don't know, it sounds like a setup, man. I don't want to go. My brother's like, let's check it out. And the other dude, who was like the drunk son, the town drunk son, Alan, I forget his last name, But so his dad was in town. He was our drunk in our part of the woods right there on the beach. And so Alan's like, I want to go. I want to meet him. You know, I never met anybody from New York before. Sounds, you know, kind of cool. So they come over and they sit him on the sofa, and Grace is sitting over here, and Rick's standing up, and I'm like sitting, I think in a chair next to her. I don't even think there was an extra chair for him to sit in unless he pulled one off the dining table. And Gracie just keeps going on about being a farmer up in upstate New York, and planting, and, you know, picking peas and planting peanuts and all this stuff. She just kept going on and on and on. And after a while, they kind of looked at each other, and you could see they were bored shitless, and they were like, okay, all right, well, it's nice meeting you. And then she'd like bring it, oh, just one more. She'd start talking about feeding the cows and, you know, milking them and stuff. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's really nice. Well, we got to go. And they start, it's like, no, one more thing. And then, you know, you got to feed the chickens and this and that. And they're like, no, really, we got to go. You know, it's nice meeting y'all. And left. And I remember when they left, I remember looking at Rick. And I just looked at him, I started laughing. He's like, what, kid? I was like, milk farmer. And Gracie started laughing. No, dairy farmer. I was like, but you're dairy farmer, but he's a milk farmer. And we started laughing about it. And she's like, hey, we got another favor to ask of you. And I was like, sure, what can I do? She's like, we've got a friend coming down in about a week and a half. And his name is Richard. And we want you to tell all your friends that our friend Richard is a milk farmer too, just like us. And I remember Rick going, oh, I don't know, man, I don't know. She's like, she turns to Rick, he looks more like a milk farmer than we do, doesn't he? If anybody looks like a farmer, it's Richard. He starts kind of laughing. Yeah, kid, tell him our friend's a milk farmer. And so it was like maybe a few nights later, all of a sudden, I get up early one morning. I think it could have been the weekend, or it could have been because Easter break was going on, because they were there during Easter. And no, it was right before Easter. And so I wake up real early. We have like a little a path through the woods that goes to the beach. It's wide enough to drive a car, you know, and takes about 30 or 40 seconds to get to the beach from my front door. And so I'm walking out, and the sun hadn't even come up yet. I got up early that morning. And I'm looking down the trail, and I can, right when I get to the turning, I can see the beach. There's some guy out on the beach. He's got long hair, brown hair, brown beard, looks around, shirt's off, pants are off, drops his drawers. The water's calm. You can even see a little like smoke coming off the water, you know, because it's the beginning of April. It's fucking cold out there. This dude starts running out in the calm water, making waves, and all of a sudden he dives over the waves, butt naked, skinny dipping, butt cakes over the waves, in the wind, skinny dipping, in the May River. And I just thought to myself, holy shit, that river's cold in the summertime. I can't imagine how cold it is right now, the beginning of April. This dude's going polar bear club. So I took off, and I gave him his privacy and let him do his little, you know, skinny dip. And I came back about, you know, I knew we weren't going to be in the water very long. I came back about 10 or 15 minutes later. He's fully dressed, and he's actually dry at this point. And I walk up nice and silent behind him. And I was like, he didn't even hear me walk up. I was like, hey, man, what's happening? He turns, huh? Hey, what's up, kid? I was like, you must be Richard. He's like, yeah, how did you know? I know Rick and Gracie. They told me you were coming in town. And they told me to keep an eye out for you. And he's like, yeah, I just drove in last night. And I was like, are you from New York? He's like, yeah. I was like, upstate New York? He's like, yeah, I'm from upstate New York. I was like, dairy country? He's like, what? I was like, yeah, dairy country, milk farmers? He's like, milk farmers? I was like, yeah, you know, if you're a dairy farmer, you're a milk farmer too. kind of looks at me. Yeah, kid, I guess so. I was like, got a lot of dairy farms up there? He's like, no. Dairy farms everywhere? No. Dairy farms around every turn, up and down the highway? No, kid, actually, I've never seen a dairy farm up there ever. It's like, oh, maybe just going down the right road. He's like, I don't know, I guess. I well, you know, they need their milk, you know? So he was kind of like, yeah. So I ended up mentioning a couple things to him, and this is the weird thing. As an 8.5-year-old kid, I had this ESP vibe that this guy Richard had driven down and brought some weed to his friend Rick. It was almost like I read about it. I don't know. It was just weird. I just picked it up and on the wavelengths, and I didn't mention that though. And so that night, I ended up taking off, and I let him go do his thing, and then Gracie ended up calling my house and asked me if I could come over for dinner. I was like, sure, yeah. And I remember my dad asking me, why would they want you to come over for dinner? And my mom's like, maybe paternal instincts. Did they have any kids? They don't have any kids with them. Mom's like, did they mention they want to have kids? And I was like, well, she wasn't really drinking and smoking. I think she might be pregnant or something. Mom's like, there, I told you, paternal instincts. And so I go over there, and Gracie had cooked up some chicken and stuff, and she served something I'd never had before. It was called peach cobbler. And after we had ate, she had served up the peach cobbler's dessert, and I ended up. My mom specifically told me, make sure you compliment this lady on her food. It's very important and polite that when you eat at someone's house, you always compliment them on the food they're serving you. And even if you don't like something, eat some of it anyway. Even if it's a little portion, eat some. So the meal was over. She served that peach cobbler. I just went on. I was like, wow, Miss Gracie, this is delicious. What is this? She's like, it's peach cobbler. You've never had it before? No. How did you make it? Oh, I didn't make it. I bought it at the store. They had all kinds of fresh food that's freshly made. You can bring it home. I was like, oh, this wasn't frozen like a TV dinner? And she's like, no, it's not a TV dinner. And so Richard was kind of quiet during this time. And Gracie ended up asking me, look, we want to go into town. Which town is better to go in? Beaufort, South Carolina, or Savannah? I was like, they're almost the same distance, but Savannah's so much nicer. And I'm like, why is that? Well, Beaufort's kind of a military town. My dad works there. He's a doctor in the Navy. And I remember her turning to Rick. Oh, his dad's a doctor in the Navy. And I remember Rick saying, your dad's a doctor? Like, yeah. But yeah, he was even a doctor in Korea in the war. He's like, really? I was like, yeah. I'm like, oh. Thought he was maybe a fisherman like some of the other guys. And so they said, look, can you ask your parents to give us a list of places we might be able to stay at in Savannah, good restaurants, and maybe places to go for entertainment afterward. So I told them, sure. After the meal was over, I went home, told my parents that, and I brought them a list, before they went. And they stayed like 4 days and 3 nights in Savannah. And when they got back, they invited me over for dinner again. And I'd been over there for dinner a couple of times and lunch a few times already. And so my mom told me, I met your friends, and I talked to the guys, and the lady and her husband. They seem like really nice people. Look, if you're going over there for dinner tonight, I want you to go out and catch some crabs, because it's a saltwater estuary type river. So you could catch crabs. We had oyster beds, but every night you catch freshwater fish too. So I go out and catch crabs. It was the best day of catching crabs I ever had. I caught crabs that were like 10 inches wide. I'd pull them up as an 8.5-year-old. I was wrestling with a couple of them. They broke loose. One dude got bit on his tennis shoe, his Chucks, his Converse, and another dude got bit on the corner of his thumb and it ripped it open. And we were catching crabs that were like almost size of your plate. And I had so many that my mom boiled up the crabs, broke them up, peeled them, pulled the meat out, and she made 2 crab salads, one for our family of mom and dad and the 6 kids, and had me bring over a salad bowl size to give to Rick and Gracie. So I brought it over, and I'm eating dinner with them. I started asking about their trip, and Rick's always really guarded, and so right away Richard's like, "Oh man, Savannah was great, man. I had some of the best food I ever ate. I ate shrimp and grits. I had some of the best fried chicken I've ever had. The barbecue was great, you know?" And Rick's like looking at it because we're sitting at a table, and Rick's at the head of the table. It's a rectangular table. Gracie's right there. I'm sitting next to her, and Rick's on the other side. Gracie always had me sit right next to her, and she'd always hug me and like do stuff, mess up my hair, and she was just something else. And just so friendly and nice, and so much class. And as Richard kept going on, Rick would look at him like, and I realized Rick was trying to give him a signal like, don't encourage the kid to have fun, you know, let him eat his food and get the hell out of here. He never wanted me over there. And so after, so Richard kept going on. I was like, well, how was the hotel? You know, because Rick wasn't really talking to him, and I'd ask Gracie and Richard things, and they would tell me, but Rick wouldn't tell me anything. You know, he was still kind of cold to me. And they were going on, the hotel was great. It was like an antique hotel. All the furnishing in it were like from the 1800s or something. It was amazing. You know, we've never had a hotel experience like that before. And I was like, well, did y'all go out and do anything after you ate? Richard's like, yeah, we went to one of the nightclubs they told us to go to. One of the bands we know from up north was playing down here, you know, during spring break. And Rick was like, all of a sudden just like, man, I told you, man. He's like, and I was like, well, what were the guys' names? You know, what was the name of the band? And then Richard's like, oh, I don't know the name of the band. It was some guys we had just met, you know, or we don't really know them. And he kind of looked at him, you know, and Gracie kept giving Rick dirty looks, you know. And I'd already asked Richard when he was out on the beach, do you play music? You know, it's like, no, not really. So when he said that, I looked at both of them dead in the eye. Richard in a friendly way, but Rick, you know, straight in the eye. I was like, y'all ever play music with these guys? And right away, Rick looks at Richard. He's like, no, not that I remember. No, he never played music with them. So, Rick started, you know, giving me the cold shoulder. I was like, well, I guess I better leave. And Gracie's like, why don't you stick around for dessert? And Rick's like, I was like, no, I can't. She's like, I've got peach cobbler and I've got vanilla ice cream. And you ever have hot peach cobbler with a scoop of vanilla ice cream? I was like, no, why would you serve it hot? So she hooks me up. She's like, you know what? And I'm cutting up with them. She's like, you know what? I want you to stay a little longer. And Rick's not happy about it. And I remember asking Rick, you know, looking at him straight in the eyes, like, you seem a little tense, man. You should try and relax while you're on your vacation. Isn't that what it's about? And Gracie and Richard start. He's like, kid, I got a lot of important work to do when I get back home. I was like, really? Important work? He's like, yeah, real important work. I was like, well, You got to milk some cows? He's like, real funny, kid. And I was like, well, those cows aren't going to milk themselves. And Gracie and Richard started busting out laughing. Richard's like, good one, kid. That was a good one. He pointed to Rick, and Rick's like, he's trying not to laugh. And they're like, no, man, that was a good one. The kid. And Richard's like, yeah, I like you, kid. You're all right, kid. I like you, man. And so Gracie's like, I want him to stay a little longer, you know. I think he's funny and he's fun to be around. And he's like, all right. And so she said, look, I'm going to call your mom and ask her how long you can stay. So she calls my mom. And before she got on the phone, Mom, how long do you think she'll let you stay? Probably not past 9, you know. And so she calls my mom, and it was like a Friday night, I think. It was either Friday or the spring break. So my mom's like, you can stay till 11. And I could hear it over the phone because I was right next to her. All right, 11. She said, okay, yeah, we'll send him home early. We'll make sure he's not late. Okay, well, it's only a 30-second minute walk, or minute walk to our house. Send him home when you all are through with him. She kind of laughs, and so she gets off the phone, and so they hang out. And they end up breaking out the wine, and the guys step outside to have a cigarette. They light up. It's like, well, we're going to go outside to smoke our cigarettes so we're not around. And Gracie kind of keeps me busy. And I know they're outside smoking their weed. They didn't even have to. I knew it in advance, So they come back in, and they're a little more animated. And Rick's starting to finally fucking lighten up, and not be such someone, all uptight and intense. Then they asked me about places I lived. I told them, I just lived in Key West right before I moved there. And they asked me about a bunch of stuff, any good stories from Key West. I told them about the dead divers they brought in one time. They wouldn't take them to the hospital. They took them to like the bait shack or something. And all the military security MPs, my dad, all the doctors came in. I was like, I wonder why they're not taking them inside the hospital. It was weird, and no one could ever speak of it. It was top secret shit. I later heard they were frogmen, but they weren't ours. And they caught them trying to set a mine under a ship or something. It was something, there was something you didn't know what was true. And told them a couple other stories. And so they had me over the next night, and they called my mom. How late can you stay? And my mom said, midnight. And so I ended up staying until midnight. And then came over for lunch another day, and they're like, yeah, Richard's going to be heading back in a day or two, She knew me and Richard got along good, We walked out to the beach and hung out. We'd walk along the beach, and I'd tell him some of the local, stuff going on. And I remember Richard leaving. He was in that big fucking hoopty. And one shook his hand. He's like, yeah, you're all right, kid. I like you, man. I'd like to see you again one day. And he took off. And then about a day and a half, 3 days, no, it was about 2 or 3 days later, Rick and Gracie took off. And they had me outside as they were getting ready to hop in the van and roll down the road, and Gracie came and gave me a hug and a kiss and thanked me for everything, told me to thank your parents for everything they did for us, telling us, the nice hotels and restaurants and the entertainment venues to go to. You know what? We had such a good time, she told me. We're thinking about coming back next year. And I was like, oh. She's like, well, what's wrong? She asked me, is it still that thing with Easter? Because my parents didn't give any of the kids Easter baskets because we're all grown up. And I was like, no, I'm not upset about that. It's nice to get free chocolate, but you outgrow that shit, especially when it's fake. You find out Santa Claus isn't real, Easter Bunny's not real, the boogeyman's not real. It's all a part of growing up, She's like, well, we'll probably come down here next year. I was like, we're not going to be here. She's like, what do you mean? But my dad already told us last night we're going to be moving up to Virginia. We're going to stay in town called Dale City, right outside of Woodbridge, right outside of D.C. And I won't be here next summer. She's like, oh, she looks at Rick. They're moving. He's not going to be here next summer. You know, he's like, where you moved to? I told him. And it's like, oh, that's too bad. You know, I hope to see you again one day. You know, you're really nice. You helped us out. You found a rental for us, and you know, you're one of the highlights of our trip. She looks at Rick, and Rick's like, what? She's like, oh, come here, kid. Yeah, kid, you are all right, kid. You know, hope to see you again one day, kid. It was nice meeting you, kid. All right, Gracie, let's go. And they hit the road.
I can't wait to get next to you tonight, Mama.
I bet Rick couldn't wait to get next to her that night in his bed at home, because he had a lot of cows to milk when he got back home. Cheers, part 1.